Greetings, everybody. This is Dan Gardner, and on behalf of Trade Accelerators and our visibility partner, Terminal 49, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar entitled The Underlying Value of Ocean Container Visibility. Whereas the title is fairly self-explanatory, I will point out that we'll be talking about ocean container visibility from the perspective as an importer, a beneficial cargo owner. But we must also point out that, needless to say, visibility and its importance in maritime supply chains is equally important on the export side of things. I'll also be elaborating a bit on our relationship with Terminal 49. For those of you who have been on webinars in the past, you might notice that this is the first time that we're doing a webinar in conjunction with anybody, but Terminal 49, to be explicit and in full disclosure, is our visibility provider at Trade Accelerators. As is always the case from an administrative perspective, this webinar is being recorded, and within a day or two will be available up on the TXC website. As far as our agenda goes for today, we'll do a 3-slide intro to Trade Accelerators and Terminal 49. That won't take very long at all. We'll also get into a brief history of ocean container visibility from the days of EDI up to API applications. Then we'll talk about how COVID-19 changed visibility apps for the better, actually, and accelerated the usefulness of ocean container visibility applications. Then we'll talk about the state of the art of ocean container visibility. And it really comes down to, it serves as a good checklist for people, either 3PLs or beneficial cargo owners, who are looking into container visibility as a good checklist for what to be looking out for based on what's available technologically in the market today. We'll review BCO and 3PL benefits of visibility. And in our case, when we talk about 3PLs, we're essentially talking about freight forwarders, non-vessel operating common carriers, and customs brokers. Second to the last bullet, we'll then get into the title of the presentation, this underlying supply chain benefits. There's lots of logistics and transportation benefits to container visibility. We're going to go a little bit deeper and talk about things like dynamic inventory management. Some pretty interesting stuff, actually, so hopefully you'll stick around for that. And then we'll talk about how visibility works at TXC, which we find especially interesting for obvious and biased reasons. That's the lineup for today, so let's get right into it. As is always the case, if you have any questions or comments or even disagree or would like to challenge anything that we're saying here, please chat it in and we'll discuss it in a way that hopefully elevates the quality of the presentation. Quick intro to Trade Accelerators, 3 slides in total, so bear with us here. But Trade Accelerators, TXC, as we like to call ourselves, was founded in 2021 as a full service provider of international shipping, customs clearance, and domestic transportation services. We are an NVOCC and tech-enabled customs broker, freight forwarder, basically. But important to point out, TXC is not a startup. We were actually born of the transition of the customs brokerage division of EQ Worldwide to Trade Accelerators. EQ, as a neutral NVO, has been in the business, goodness, for as long as I have, and I don't want to admit how many decades I've been at it. But again, TXC is not a startup. It was a carve out of an existing brokerage division that we rebranded and teched up and put a little TLC on it, little TLC for TXC, as we like to say. But essentially, we offer tech-enabled integrated logistics services to small to medium-sized U.S. importers. You can see the portfolio over here. That's actually a screenshot from our website. And we have offices in Denver, Los Angeles, where I'm broadcasting from, Miami, Newark, and San Juan, with global access to the EQ Worldwide operational network. This is probably a first, actually, for our webinars, but I mentioned that I'm located in Los Angeles, and it's relevant. So I've never done a weather report before, but if you haven't been paying attention to the national weather, or if you're on the East Coast and don't want to hear about how nice it is in Southern California, well, it's not going to be very nice at all. There's a major storm blowing in. The wind started up last night, and I bring this up because the terminals, I'm hearing from my pals in the forwarding and drayage business down at the ports, that the terminals they're not shut down, but they're not offloading or loading vessels due to the high winds. It's just dangerous with the crane. So that could interrupt things like appointments and jeopardize last free days and what have you. So I just want to point that out. First time ever on a TXC webinar, a weather report, but it's real. It's going to rain like crazy tomorrow and Friday. So be cognizant of that if you have operations in and out of LA Long Beach. Intro to Terminal 49. Again, Terminal 49 is the visibility provider of TXC. We want to be very open about that. It is a logistics technology company specializing in container visibility, needless to say, via its container tracking API, application programming interface, and shipment visibility dashboard. The company was founded in 2015, HQ'd up in Oakland, California, and they provide a real-time container tracking service via direct links, not screen scraping or anything like that, with ocean carriers and terminals, important to note, at both origin and destination. We'll get more into those details in just a bit, but important to point out. T49, as we like to call them, has APIs directly with 30 steamship lines and hundreds of terminals around the world, all of the container terminals in Canada and the United States. The services that they offer, to point out where a good example of this is applicable for both beneficial cargo owners, actual importers, and 3PL. And this is public information. It's on their website. That the technology, I should say, is so well looked upon in the investment community that they had a Series A fundraise of $6.5 million. Again, that's public information. You can learn more about T49 at their website. Okay. Let's talk for a second about the history of ocean container visibility, really just from the perspective of setting the stage for a modern day conversation. But since the early days of the US import boom, which essentially started in the late 1980s, to add some chronological perspective, BCOs, importers, beneficial cargo owners, they really ask three questions. Where's my stuff? When am I going to get it? And what's it going to cost me? And as far as the state of the art goes today in container visibility, any service, and there's more than one, we'll talk about that in a bit also, but any service has to answer the first two questions. Where's my stuff? Pretty basic. The technology for on the water tracking and stuff is no longer considered cutting edge. When am I going to get it? It's a different story, because that relates to terminal operations. And one of the black holes, at least until a couple of years ago, the irony was that you could track a container on the water, but when it got to a terminal, depending on what port it was, kind of fell into a black hole. That's changed quite a bit. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. What's it going to cost me? That's a different ballgame from a landed cost perspective. But again, APIs in the container visibility space have to answer the first two questions, including terminal status of a container. But starting in the 1990s, and we won't go into an in-depth history lesson, but those of you who have been around as long as I have, unfortunately, the first iteration of ocean container visibility, in air quotes, was through EDI, or what's known as electronic data interchange. That technology is from the 1970s. It's still around today. It's based on ANSI standards. It works for sure, but of course, since it's been around since the 1970s, literally, it has its drawbacks and weaknesses. I will say that EDI is definitely still around. In fact, you might be familiar with the platform known as Intra, which is the EDI-based platform through which ocean carriers and freight forwarders, NVOs, have communicated, still very much in play. So we can't discount the significance of EDI. However, around 2015, digital forwarders like the Flexports of the world, the Zen Cargos, you have to give them a lot of credit, because they really revolutionized visibility with real-time GPS-based container vessel tracking. And I'm talking about going back 7-8 years ago, when you could literally get on Google Maps and see the little icon of the vessel coming across the water. That was quite innovative at the time and novel at the time. These days, it's yesterday's news, to be perfectly honest with you. But credit must be given to those digital forwarders who really woke up some of the more dormant freight forwarders, customs brokers, NVOs in the market, and pushed them to enhance their tracking capabilities as well. So obviously the beneficiary, I should say, of all of this competition is the BCO. So that's a good thing. Now, wrapping up this slide, just before the pandemic hit, a slew of startups emerged using APIs, these application programming interfaces, to enhance visibility, especially at the ocean terminals. This, again, tracking of ships and containers on the water, old news. Visibility into exactly what's going on with ocean terminals, not via EDI, which is batch oriented and oftentimes stale by the time the information becomes available. This is API based stuff and represents a major difference in how containers have been tracked. Quick comment on the slew of startups. As I said, that there's more than one ocean container visibility provider out there. We as TXC happen to choose Terminal 49 after an exhaustive search and direct experience with multiple providers, but we don't want to portray the market as some sort of a monopoly either. There are capable companies out there. We just thought that Terminal 49 was a better fit for us. We'll talk about objectively some of the reasons why within the context of what you should be looking for in a container visibility tool as we move forward. Let's move on and talk about what became a killer app for visibility. And we all know what it is, especially during the COVID era, was Demurrage and Detention. Not only were BCOs, importers especially, getting hit with astronomical ocean charges. We all know the numbers, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 for a 40-footer coming out of South China into LA Long Beach. But Demurrage and Detention was out of control. And some would claim, and I happen to be one of them, that Demurrage and Detention was abusive. If you're not familiar with that terminology, demurrage is a fee charged by an ocean terminal for not picking up a container in a timely fashion, whereas detention, same penalty for not returning an empty container in a timely fashion. And this was indeed abusive to the point where the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022 became legislation to, in part, battle unjust demurrage and detention. With that said, the first bullet, the supply chain issues born of COVID-19 really contributed to the substantial growth in demand for real-time container visibility. We break that visibility down into two components in these second and third bullet points. From an inventory management perspective, which we will elaborate upon towards the end of the presentation, BCOs needed E2E, that's just end-to-end visibility, because they had to answer that question, where's my stuff? And with so much congestion at origin, at the factories, at the origin terminals, destination terminals, customs issues, et cetera, this became super important. As far as this slide goes and our killer app conversation, huge increases in demurrage and detention fees made visibility into terminal operations especially attractive. And that's where the real value, the modern day value of container APIs, meaning direct connectivity with the ocean terminals, whether they were run directly by the carrier or through a third-party marine terminal operator, became so hugely important. Because as we'll see in a moment with some examples, we're not talking about, yeah, your container's at the terminal. We're talking about what is the status of that container. Is it available? Are there fees pending? Is it UTL? Probably the most undesirable acronym in the whole maritime lexicon. UTL is unable to locate or in a restricted area. This is the level of detail that we're talking about here, and really what you should be looking for if you're a 3PL or a BCO looking to contract for visibility services. This is really quite an important point. And then finally, I said this a moment ago, the maritime shipping community, because there is competition out there, we do not want to in any way portray it as not being a competitive market. We in the shipping community have been the beneficiary of ongoing innovations specific to container availability and container visibility. and it keeps getting better. It's just our job as 3PLs and you all as BCOs that are out there to stay up to date on what these visibility tools can do, because these companies are getting funded for a reason. And part of the reason is they have core capabilities today, but like in any competitive environment, they have to keep getting better and better. And we'll talk about that as we proceed. All righty. Let's go into a little bit about the state of the art of container visibility. And you might consider this a checklist, as I had mentioned at the top end of the presentation, because this is what you really should be looking for. Whether you're a 3PL, and we do have friendly competitors online, we welcome that, or you're a BCO. This is just what you should be looking for. And just by no coincidence, it happens to be what Terminal 49 can do. First off, has to be API based. No more EDI, no screen scraping, none of that. It has to be API based, which is essentially a recurring phone call between systems, the visibility provider and an ocean terminal that's getting constant updates. And you can see on various container visibility applications that the updates are coming in every 15 minutes or so. So it's pretty real-time stuff, but you want to focus on API based. That's pretty much a given these days, to be honest, but it should also be supported by GPS vessel positioning, which what you see on the right-hand side is actually an excerpt of that, the underlying service provider to Terminal 49 that provides positioning. Where's the ship? And be able to blow up a map and see exactly where it is and get a ship is 5 days out, for example. So a customs entry can be submitted here in the States. So that vessel positioning is important, GPS based. Starting to get into a little bit more detail. And we'll show this in just a sec. But the visibility, think about this, must encompass empty out at origin to empty return at destination. Empty out means that a booking has been made, a request for a container has been made, and the empty has been dispatched out to the factory at origin. That's what empty out means. And you might say to yourself, well, how do you manage that from a visibility perspective? We'll tell you how in just a bit, but you want that visibility from empty out all the way through the entire process to empty return at destination, not just getting an appointment at LA Long Beach and saying that an appointment has been made and you made the last free day and there's no extra fees due or anything like that. You want to know when the empty gets returned. That's the detention component of demurrage and detention. Destination terminal details a must, and I said this just a moment ago, but things like container status. Is it on a customs hold? Has pair pass not been paid in LA Long Beach? How many free days? Or is it beyond the last free day? That's what we're talking about, destination terminal details. Here's one some companies don't think about. First of all, and I saw this as recently as this morning, and it kind of blew my mind, to be honest, conversations around tracking based on a container number. Now, that's interesting, probably to the steamship line to manage their assets. But what BCOs are really interested in is tracking by bill of lading number or by other reference numbers like a PO, the contents of which are in a container. With that said, we'll elaborate on it in just a bit. But today's solutions, and not all of them do this, so be careful with this one. All visibility solutions have to accommodate multi-container BLs. You know this as BCOs and 3PLs. It's not unusual for an importer to bring in 2, 3, 4, 5 containers on a single bill of lading. Well, what about the status of all of them? A solution has to accommodate multi-container bills of lading. Another point, solution has to handle inland point intermodal IPI moves that go from ocean freight onto the rail under the same bill of lading. Well, what about that rail component? Doesn't make much sense to have visibility all the way across the Pacific Ocean to a Seattle or a Portland or an Oakland or an LA Long Beach, only to have a container transferred to the rail and lose visibility on the rail. That makes zero sense whatsoever. So a solution has to handle IPI moves. Some other nice features, bells and whistles type stuff. You want to be able to filter, receive email alerts and daily upgrades as features that are integral to the value prop. We'll show you some pictures of that in just a second. You want to be able to tag containers as a very important feature. Input information like a reference number, such as 1 or 2 or even 3 PO numbers that are tied to the contents of a container, which can be tracked by those PO numbers or by the bill of lading number and maybe the ocean container number. But again, how many importers do you know? If I'm a buyer at an importer, for example, am I going to track cargo by a container number? I have no idea what the container number is. I know what my item numbers are on a PO. I know what my PO numbers are. If I'm a logistics person working for an importer, I'll know what the bill of lading number is. So that point around bill of lading numbers as a tracking mechanism, really quite important and way more relevant than a container number, for sure, at least from the BCO perspective. And then in the end, you want flexible report writing also. So that's kind of the state of the art. I mean, there's more, few other items, but if you're out looking, and we at TXC, we are not visibility providers. We are a customer of a visibility provider that happens to be Terminal 49. We're just saying, if objectively, no matter who you evaluate, and you should evaluate several, these are the types of questions that you should be asking and the type of features that you should be looking for, because not everybody has them. Let's take a look at some pictures that kind of validates what it is we're talking about. And again, this is straight out of T49, Terminal 49, configured to the way we at Trade Accelerators wish to use it. So you'll see here container dashboard for Dan. That's me. If you missed the introduction, my name's Dan Gardner. But every day I can go on Terminal 49 and see a configuration. Here's what's going on with your shipments at Trade Accelerators. You'll notice up the top here, you can filter by today's arrivals. This one happens to be ETAs changed, and you can see the red and the green over here. Red is that the ETA has been extended. Green is, by some miracle, a ship's going to show up a day or two early. But I can also click on containers at risk. So you start to see how these dashboards are organized, and also the ability to click on, see that there's that BOL, the bill of lading number, to be able to click on that and know that there's one container on this particular shipment, that there's 2 containers on this shipment. And if you were to click on them, you'd see the breakdown of each container. Now, there's a couple things that we blocked out here. There's a couple things that we blocked out here, and you can see it's actually the name of the importer. We want to be respectful. This is live data, by the way. This is not test data at all. So this is what I see every morning. So we wanted to block out the name of the importer here, but you can see the BL number, the reference number, that's the internal, in our case, our internal TXC number, origin, destination. And again, this happens to be ETA changed, but if we were to click on containers at risk, we could see containers on their last free day, or for whatever reason, beyond the last free day. But again, we blanked out who the importers are. And you see some names down here. This is another interesting feature that you should look for in any solution. And that is that from a customs brokerage perspective, from an NVO perspective, and that's what we are at TXC, we assign containers to specific individuals, and we know who's responsible for that container, for that clearance, for that drayage, move, et cetera, et cetera. And those are the names that you see here. Above them, as I said, are the names of the actual customer. Wouldn't be fair to keep those in there. We want to respect their anonymity. But this is just as an example of a quick dashboard, and I don't even work in operations, by the way. I happen to be a co-founder of the company, but we like to pay attention to this type of thing from a management perspective. Let's move on. Wanted to talk a little bit about what's out there as far as container history at the terminal, because the greatest irony pre-APIs in the container tracking business, if you can call it that, was that the irony was, the grand paradox was that you could know where a container was on a ship on the water, but the closer it came and when it got to a terminal, you lose visibility into that. And EDI just didn't cut the mustard because it was too slow. And batch oriented. So today, this happens to be one shipment that provides container history at the terminal. It happens to be a rail shipment. You'll notice up here a 40-footer. This is my colleague that's handling this particular shipment, but the chronology of the history just coming in to the terminal starts down below here. You can see on ship, on ship, on ship. Then it's not available. You'd have to click on this, but to see these other holds, that could be a custom, hadn't cleared through customs yet. Pier pass hadn't been paid. Maybe there was some demurrage on a container. The point is you're going to know what that is. And then to point out here, you start to see, okay, it's on the ship. Now it's on the terminal. Now you see when the last free day is, February 2nd. Now this was going out on the rail, bear in mind. You can see that up here. And you could click on this to see the continuation of that tracking. This is a really important feature because as we said a moment ago, what good is it if you can track an IPI move up to an ocean container terminal, Houston, Savannah, New York, New Jersey, and then it goes on the rail and it's like, wow, I wonder where my stuff is. You want to be looking for that capability. IPI tracking as for container visibility is quite important. But again, you can see what the last free day is, and that on the 31st at 11:34 a.m. Pacific time, was picked up, no holds, and departed, meaning it was taken out to the rail ramp. Now, obviously, if this were not a screenshot, and this is an actual, these are real dates, this is real, 100% real. You could click on the rail component and continue your tracking journey. So envision a scenario where you run a DC in, this was what, if I recall, this was going out to Louisville, if I remember correctly, a DC out in Louisville, a fulfillment center. And you have a bunch of containers that are going out on the rail to Louisville. Not only do you want to know that those containers are on the way, but you can time things like labor planning. Do we need more people to unstuff containers? Is a container full of furniture that has 150 pieces in it that can be offloaded pretty quickly with a clamp and 2 men and women in an hour? Or is it filled with small items, floor loaded, that's going to take 8 hours to offload? So start to think about the benefits of the planning that can be done based on this visibility. Labor, space, door availability at a DC, all of those things are enabled by the ability to continue tracking on the rail. A couple more and we'll move on. Container terminology. This was rail as well, Navashiva out of India. But I mentioned earlier that in terms of what you're looking for in capabilities in a visibility tool, you want empty out at origin to empty return. And that empty out means that an empty container was drayed out to a factory or a vendor in South China, let's say, for loading. We'll explain how that visibility is achieved in just a bit, but we won't go through the entire chronology, but you can see this was a rail move. It happens to be Navashiva into Virginia and out to Louisville. Underlined here, empty out, empty in, meaning that container was returned back to a rail ramp. This is important stuff. And you have your dates confirmed with the little check mark here. It was a 40-foot high cube to Louisville. So important tools that you want to be looking for there. Some other tools that you want to be looking for, both milestones and report writing. This is off the Good Morning Dan screenshot, but you start to see whether you're a 3PL or a BCO engaging or contracting for visibility tools, what you need to have available out there. Your usage report, arrivals coming in, containers awaiting empty return. From a detention perspective, that might be of interest to some people, lots of people actually. Containers awaiting pickup, containers on ship. You can see status as well as KPI oriented stuff. KPI being a key performance indicator. Containers with a customs hold, demurrage. Imagine being able to write a report for an entire quarter, containers with demurrage and what the total was. That's a big number. And once you know the number, you can hopefully work from a perspective of continuous improvement to drive down demurrage. That's what this tool, another capability of this tool. And then finally, I happen to like this one, and I get it every day. I couldn't resist. I put this in at the last minute, but you want to be looking for tools that are proactively going to tell you what's going on. Again, whether you're a customs broker, an NVOCC, or a beneficial cargo owner, that these are the type of tools that are out there. And look at the date. I mean, it was today, literally. I get these mails every day, just as a daily digest. So it's a much bigger list, obviously. The name of the customer has been blanked out. These are the names of the folks that are handling this. This particular container is coming in to Trade Accelerators. That's why you see our name there, but these are real. This is not mock-ups. These are not beta tests. This is the real deal. And it just allows us and our people, more importantly, to know every day what's going on with the containers that they're responsible for. That's a good feeling. If you're a BCO working with a forwarder or an NVO, and you know that they have this technology in place that in the end is going to enhance your performance. All right, let's get back to some benefits of container visibility from the 3PL perspective. We are a 3PL. We're licensed customs brokers, NVOs, air freight, the whole shooting match. But as a market, this is the perspective that we're trying to provide. Because honestly, when we started researching container visibility, and we've been at this for a while, we underestimated just how much this container visibility tool would enhance our own performance, our own customer service, and consequentially, the service that we provided to our customers. There's a lot that a 3PL can gain from a container visibility tool. Check out some of these points here. From an internal perspective, forwarders, NVOs, and customs brokers use visibility selfishly, to be honest with you, to enhance their own productivity and customer service. So it's as BCOs, and you're evaluating potential new partners, whether it's an NVO, a customs broker, whoever it might be, in addition to rates and service and years in business and what have you, ask these questions about the container visibility tool that they provide or that they currently don't provide, more importantly. Check some of this stuff out, some of which I've already mentioned. This is internal, essentially to a customs broker. Containers can be assigned to specific team members. We saw that. We can organize inbound containers chronologically, meaning which ones are, or who's up next in terms of container availability and such. Or, as I also said previously, if we can use positioning to know that a vessel is 5 days out, we can submit that customs entry. That's very helpful. The tags that a 3PL use can be customized as well. We also saw the ease with which we can flag containers at risk that require immediate attention for whatever reason that might be. I already mentioned that we can link vessel location to customs entry submission, that 5 days out capability. Big point here, whereas the BCO is responsible for demurrage and detention, at least they should be. That didn't happen that way during COVID-19, but that's a whole other subject. The 3PL, freight forwarder customs broker, can proactively manage demurrage and detention on behalf of the BCO. Now, that doesn't mean that the BCO should not be engaged in the management of demurrage and detention. They absolutely should. But working in tandem, utilizing this technology, I can absolutely positively guarantee you that you will never eliminate demurrage and detention in its entirety, but to reduce by 60, 70, 80%, especially in the post-pandemic era when there is just as much freight around, absolutely, easily cut demurrage and detention by half if you use this tool correctly. Of course, think about this one too. This visibility facilitates coordination with drayage providers because 3PLs, sometimes they do drayage themselves, they have their own assets, most of the time they don't. Sometimes the BCO would designate who the drayage provider is going to be. Sometimes the 3PL will offer drayage as part of an integrated logistics service offering. Either way, it doesn't matter because the visibility tool facilitates the coordination. Pretty hard to get an appointment in LA Long Beach if you don't know if a container is available. And instead of a customs broker, freight forwarder, having to go on to the websites of 13 different container terminals and to know through this tool what containers are available and which ones aren't. And then immediately upon containers becoming available, go out for an appointment. That's going to reduce dwell time, meaning the amount of time that a container is sitting around for no apparent reason. And then, as we also said, to generate reports on behalf of clients. Let's look at this from the BCO perspective. And as I said, we have both BCOs and 3PLs online. We even have other technology providers online. Everybody's welcome because this is an objective conversation. But looking at things from the perspective of the beneficial cargo owner, the BCO can contract with a visibility provider directly or work through a 3PL that offers visibility. Here's a quick caveat. As BCOs looking to work with 3PLs that offer container visibility, most 3PLs, meaning an NVO/freight forwarder, are going to stipulate that they handle the inbound transportation to access visibility. The old, give me a freight and you get the visibility. We take a different approach at TXC. I'll tell you what that is in just a bit. But ask the question, do I have to give you my freight to get visibility? Fair question to ask. Tags help BCOs to tie container contents to BL numbers. Container numbers, I'm sorry, unless you're the steamship line, it's meaningless, to be honest with you, because BCOs are asking questions about where freight is based on a bill of lading, an item number, a PO number. So tags will help BCOs to tie contents to BL numbers. A purchase order number, as an example. This is a big tool, especially for larger importers that can't track every single shipment, every single minute of every single day. You manage by exception. Well, containers at risk, that tag on the screenshot that I showed is essentially that. I mean, what better name for exception management than containers at risk? You just don't have the time or resources. Maybe you'd like to track every single container, but importers that get into the hundreds and thousands of containers a year, that's a little difficult to do. So exception management is enabled. Definitely facilitates coordination between forwarders, brokers, and drayage providers, because depending on your import model, your strategy, you might use a different forwarder, might use a different customs broker, and might use a different drayage provider that you as the BCO designate, because that's the strategy, that's the path that you've taken. You have to be able to coordinate between these folks. Customs broker is going to submit the entry, obviously. They might be, more than likely, almost guaranteed actually, providing a delivery order to a drayage provider, who in turn is going to make an appointment to go and pick up these containers. BCOs don't have time to be doing this on every single container. So yes, you need human expertise. You need people that absolutely know what they're doing, that have contacts at the ports, with the drayage providers, etc. But those efforts, that knowledge, should be augmented and facilitated by these technology tools. In the end, and I will use the term guarantee, you use a visibility tool the way it should be, and a visibility tool that has the capabilities that we've talked about, because not all of them do, you will drive down demurrage and detention for certain. The other piece is, from a report writing perspective, and we'll wrap up this slide, is that the right container visibility tool allows for carrier and terminal performance measurement to flag carriers that are doing a really good job, that are working well with third-party marine terminal operators. There's never a hassle about unable to locate, or containers in a restricted area, or always some beef over demurrage. You can measure carrier and terminal performance on the right type of visibility platform. Okay, start to wrap things up here, because we do want to talk about the underlying supply chain benefits of ocean container visibility. And we're going to try to do so in a more visual manner. So this is a admittedly boiled down inbound supply chain of an importer who happens to sell through retail stores, online, and institutional sales, meaning as a wholesaler. Maybe even white label products. Throughout the course of a year, this company, for whatever products they sell, maybe it's wearing apparel, maybe it's footwear, maybe it's sporting goods, it doesn't matter, to be honest, but let's say consumer goods is going to do a forecast at the beginning of the year. How much do we think we're going to sell of every product in 3 different product families, wearing apparel, footwear, and fashion accessories, as an example? They then have to convert that forecast into what? Purchase orders that are going to be placed at specific times, specific periods of the year, and specific quantities on their overseas vendors who go into production and a build to order model. They start shipping, and depending on the import model, and this little graphic is designed to accommodate several, an importer might be using a buyer's consolidation service where LCL shipments are sent to a CFS and all put into one container. It could be a straight up CY to CY move, container yard to container yard, just 40 footers and 40 high cubes all day long, going from Shenzhen to Long Beach. Maybe it's a transload operation where containers are stripped at destination and then sent out to multiple DCs, or it could be an intermodal move, that IPI, inland point intermodal move. This graphic is meant to accommodate all of those. From the moment a forecast is generated, POs are placed on origin vendors, goods go into a production, and they start moving inbound. When goods start moving, it's no longer a logistics exercise alone. It is an inventory management exercise. Going back to the commentary on container numbers, importers aren't interested in container numbers. They're interested in what's in a container, by item, by PO, and more than likely by bill of lading number. With that said, getting down to the bullet points here, and this is real stuff because we work with clients that utilize this quite effectively. In addition to those important benefits that we already talked about, like reducing container dwell time and mitigating demurrage and detention, very real, very important. There are several supply chain functions, not logistics functions, supply chain functions that are enabled by visibility. Think about this. With real-time visibility, where's my stuff? On the water, at a destination terminal, at an origin terminal for that matter, where's my stuff? With real-time visibility, importers can dynamically allocate inventory while goods are on the water or at a terminal. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, every container, I hope, has something in it. Maybe it's footwear, maybe it's wearing apparel, maybe it's accessory, maybe it's all of the above. Well, the retailer, that online company, is looking at their actual sales, seeing what the demand for products are in Chicago versus Dallas versus Savannah versus Miami, Florida. And with knowledge of the whereabouts of a container, and more importantly, what's in that container, they can do what? They can start allocating inventory. For whatever reason, the store in Chicago is selling a certain style jean like crazy. Let's allocate some of that inventory whilst on the water to that store. That's what we mean there. Allocate inventory based on actual demand. Here's another one. Visibility into pipeline inventory, meaning stuff that's somewhere on its way coming into the United States. That's what we mean by pipeline inventory. Also enhances a function known as available to promise. Most importers are going to have, well, they all should in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's a spreadsheet, maybe it's a full-blown ERP, but have to have an inventory management system that, for example, says of that style of jean that we alluded to a moment ago, we have 10,000 in inventory, but 7,500 of them have already been promised to a store or promised to a white label client. It's already been spoken for. That's what available to promise is. So people that are allocating inventory, a buyer, for example, who might be panicking because they don't anticipate having enough merchandise to fill all promises to customers. If they have visibility into an IPI shipment, for example, that's 3 days out from that DC in Louisville, they can rest at ease knowing, okay, I'm going to have enough inventory in 3 days. I can promise this to a customer for next week. That's what available to promise means. And that visibility just enables that exponentially. The other piece over the long term is that I said a moment ago that importers will do a sales forecast for every product and every product family that they carry. They'll create a budget based on that, how much they can invest in inventory and what have you. But then actual sales start happening. Store sales are ringing up. Online sales are ringing up. Institutional sales, wholesale sales are ringing up. And this function known as sales and operations planning, while it's been made to sound like it's more, what it really comes down to is a company, minimum on a monthly basis, is literally going to sit down with a multifunctional team, purchasing, demand management, certainly logistics, sales, and go over the actual sales of every product and make a comparison to what they forecasted to sell and what they're actually selling. Maybe that gene that we spoke of a moment ago is still selling like crazy, not just in Chicago, but all over the place. Do they need to increase their purchases on overseas vendors? Maybe a particular accessory that they thought was going to do super well isn't doing super well, yet there are a bunch of POs still out there for later on in the year. Might they back off of those POs depending on the last change date of a purchase order, last cancellation date, last ship date of a purchase order? They'll make those adjustments. Maybe they buy more, maybe they buy less. That's what sales and operations planning is. But imagine how the performance of sales and operations planning teams can be enhanced by visibility of knowing exactly what they have coming in, when, and where it is. Powerful, powerful stuff. That is the underlying supply chain value of ocean container visibility. The other stuff, super important. Reducing dwell time, mitigating demurrage and detention. That's real money and real sales that could potentially be lost because of dwell time. Certainly not undervaluing the importance of those aspects of a supply chain. But when you look into the other things that these tools can enable, it's really pretty amazing. So when you're looking into this type of stuff, or even if you're doing it today, put these tools to work towards these ends. You'll find great benefits there. All righty, let me move on here. All right, this is the last slide. If I remember, we're going to finish a couple minutes early here, but just to give you a window into how visibility works at Trade Accelerators, because we like to think we're a little different for a lot of different reasons. We think we're different from the many capable competitors that we have in the marketplace. Within the framework of we are NVOs for sure, and we are licensed customs brokers for sure. In fact, I haven't done all the research on this, but I will blow our own horn for a moment here. I don't know that there's a company, an NVO/customs broker that's been founded in the last 10 years where the two founders, myself and my partner and friend of 30 years, Spencer Strader, both of us are licensed customs brokers, and both of us have run multiple NVO CCs. That's a pretty unique combination that I hopefully is reflected in the quality of service, the great people that we have, and the technological tools that we bring to the table. With that said, here's how we do this, because it's not the same. Number one, we offer a visibility to all customers, which is to say you are not required to give us your freight, your inbound freight, to enjoy visibility tools. We are carrier agnostic, which is to say you can use any freight forwarder, any NVO, any direct steamship line contract you want to gain visibility. There's no additional charge for container visibility. It's part of the program, part of the value proposition. However, and this is more from a visibility enabling perspective, we can't do what we do without having things this way. So it's not optional. However, and this will make sense upon explanation, to enable visibility starting at the origin terminal, as we saw in those live examples, we have to do the ISF, the importer security filing, as well as be the customs broker. And you know the old saying, you date your forwarder, you marry your customs broker. And we are very capable customs brokers. In fact, we'll admittedly a smaller organization, but of the people that do entries, 60% of our people are licensed customs brokers, hundreds of years of collective experience. So you're in good hands there. But why do we need to do the ISF and be the broker? To enhance this visibility, I should say to trigger, not enhance, to trigger the visibility and allow you to use any carrier you want. Well, visibility begins at origin, when the ISF is matched to the AMS bill of lading. It's either going to be a house bill, a master bill, or what Customs refers to as a regular bill of lading. We won't get into that whole story, house bill versus master bill. It's obviously the lowest house bill number that has to be used as an IFS, but there's a link between the ISF and the automated manifest system bill of lading. That means that there's action. Goods are moving. This link is what enables visibility at origin terminal all the way to empty return at destination. That is a key feature. I mean, most customs brokers are going to want to do the ISF anyhow, so it's not a big ask of BCOs. But please do be cognizant of the fact that we're very serious and very capable customs brokers. We're also NVOs, but you can use any freight forwarder or any NVO you want as long as we're your broker and do your ISF and the customs brokerage. All of this is part of the program. Not everybody acts that way. And you might ask yourself, well, why would you guys do it that way? A, because we think it's the right thing to do with a customer, and B, to be quite honest with you, we're sufficiently confident in our capabilities as brokers that eventually a BCO is going to say, we'd like to take a look at you for the transportation. And we're willing to take that chance because we know it's not that big of a risk because we have that level of confidence in our capabilities. Also, wrapping things up here, TXC works with importers to customize those tags, your dashboards, your email alerts, daily bulletins, the whole nine. We'll set it up in advance to the configuration that best helps you to execute upon your business model. With all of that said, this was the last slide. So number one, thank you for attending. All the best throughout 2023. If you didn't hear what I said at the beginning of the broadcast, I am located, have been for 17 years now, right next to the LA Long Beach Port Complex, and we have weather coming into town. Started getting crazy windy last night, getting word from our friends down at the port, the drayage people, the forwarders, the brokers, we know this anyway because we deal with this stuff every day, that the terminals, at least earlier today, were not loading or offloading ships, which could trickle into operations like existing appointments, whether a terminal's accepting empties, you know the drill, the whole chassis story, et cetera. So be cognizant of that because there could be a ripple effect because it isn't even raining yet. The sun is out. This is Southern Cal. After a while, people panic, if it gets below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But in all seriousness, it's going to rain like crazy tomorrow. It's going to rain like crazy on Friday, which could cause some problems for terminal operations when it comes to things like demurrage and detention and getting empties back in and et cetera, et cetera. So that's important to point out. Also, as is always the case, this presentation is recorded. It'll be up on the website, I want to say, what's today? Wednesday, Friday at the latest. You can view it for free. No one's going to call you and harass you after the fact. If you want to learn more about our business, this is who we are. But also, in the spirit of objectivity and open shared learning, we have a bunch of videos in addition to the webinars. The videos, there's 13 of them. They run about 15 to 20 minutes a piece on every topic you can imagine related to importing, ISF, commercial invoice requirements, duty rates. You don't even have to register for those on the TXC site. We have no idea who even views them because it's there to help people. So hopefully in that spirit, this presentation, while we talked a fair amount, a lot about our relationship with Terminal 49, which we value greatly, that it was presented in an objective fashion that puts you in a position, be you a 3PL or a BCO, to make objective decisions yourself about how to proceed with container visibility capabilities based on an enhanced knowledge of what's going on in the marketplace today. There's good providers out there, just like there's good forwarders and customs brokers. We like to think that our tandem with Terminal 49 puts us at a unique position. With all of that said, you have a question, comment after the fact, as I said, write to me, give me a call. Happy to hear from you. In the meantime, stay safe. Hard to believe that February is almost over. We have the Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference in town starting tomorrow, at which I have 4 different speaking sessions. So I'll throw out a shameless plug there. Please check, if you're going to TPM, please do check the roster and stop by any of the presentations that I'll be making. But again, thank you, stay safe, and we hope to see you on the next webinar.